Hello and welcome. I'm joined by Blackbird9, and we haven't had a chat in a long time. So, how are you, Blackbird?
Greetings, good sir. Thanks for having me back on. Yes, it's been a while since we've done one of these, so I'm really looking forward to it. Especially this one is kind of in my wheelhouse, as we say here in the States. So,
Yeah.
have a big bucket of rocks and nuggets. So, I hope everybody enjoys.
Yeah, well, people have been asking me to do another movie review, and this one is Enemy of the State from 1998. So, let's go through some basic details and a very, very quick synopsis, and then we'll just pick out parts we liked, things we noticed in the film, maybe certain similarities with modern life, etc. Because when this came out, it was a bit of a shocker for a lot of people. So, right, it was released on November 20th, 1998 in the USA. It was directed by Tony Scott. The budget for the movie was $90 million and it made $250.8 million. So it was a success story. It was distributed by Touchstone Pictures and Universal Pictures. It stars some big ones here. Will Smith, he plays Robert Clayton Dean, labor lawyer. We have Brill, who's played by Gene Hackman, who recently passed away. Reynolds, who's the bad boy, is played by John Voight. He's a rogue element in the NSA, or perhaps the whole NSA is a rogue element. Rachel Banks is played by Lisa Bonet. I believe she was in The Cosby Show back in the day. And then we have Carla Dean, the wife of Robert Clayton Dean, and she's played by Regina King, and so on and so forth. There's even a very young-looking Jack Black in the movie. Right, a quick synopsis. We have this very corrupt US official. He's in the NSA. His name is Thomas Reynolds, and he meets up with a congressman. Now, I think the congressman is really being stalked because he's out for a walk with his golden retriever, and Reynolds turns up with his henchmen, and he asks the congressman to think twice about voting against expansive surveillance legislation. And the congressman says, "I won't be bullied," and Reynolds says, "I'm very sorry, we couldn't see eye to eye on this." And then Reynolds gives the nod, and his henchmen, they assassinate the congressman. And then they make it look like some sort of accident. They inject something into his neck, and they put him into his car, and then they push the car into a lake. And a videotape has recorded all this because, or a camera has recorded all this because there are cameras in the park, and I think the cameras are there to record the migration of geese or something. And a guy turns up, he collects the tape, and I think he's watching the news in his flat at the same time, and it's on about, that this congressman was found dead in his car in a lake. And then he decides, I better check out the video, because that's exactly where, that quote unquote accident happened. And when he looks at the tape, he realizes that he's got evidence. He has the murder on camera, and he foolishly phones up a friend, and the phone call is recorded by the NSA. They're able to know that this guy knows, and I'm not sure. He makes a copy on his computer. You have all these NSA guys outside his door trying to get in, and he looks out his window and he sees more NSA guys out on the street, and he decides he better run for it. So he runs, and he ends up, and it's quite fascinating because they're able to follow all his movements with satellite imagery, etc., videos. And he ends up in a department store, and that's where Will Smith's character is shopping, and the guy puts a cartridge or a video or whatever into the shopping bag. And Dean has no idea that he has this hot property in his bag. And so he becomes the enemy of the state. And later on, he He's helped by Edward Brill Lyle, played by Hackman, and he's also framed for murder because the NSA decide to up the ante on this guy. They debank him. They publish things about an affair he had with this woman who died, and his wife finds out about it. And yeah, Will Smith is in a very, very bad situation. His credit cards don't work, and he's alone until Brill comes along and decides that he's going to have to help Dean on this one. So let's go to Blackbird 9. When did you first watch this? And I know we spoke briefly before this recording, but I'll ask you, when did you first watch this, Blackbird, and what were your initial impressions?
Yeah, great synopsis of the first part of the film, the setup. And yes, somebody had, I think the way it went was somebody had requested this in my chat room that we do this movie. And I was thinking of another film that, like a Harlan Ellison type, story. And I was like, yeah, that would be a great one to do. And so I had never seen this. And so when I watched it Wednesday night, Wacky Wednesday, with Atma, and she'd never seen it either. And we were both just, jaws on the floor of, oh my God, this was my old life in the 90s. Because, 1998, I was still backstage in this whole telecommunication industry that was being clandestinely weaponized against every country. And this is part of that surveillance state that has been rolling out. And you could just see all the things that I was dealing with. For the newbies that don't know my story, I was contracted in the late 90s or the mid 90s to develop a set of telecommunication courses because we were converging all of telecommunications onto one network. This was, called convergence theory. And basically we were going to start doing, instead of old circuit switch networks, telephone networks, we were going to do voice over IP and multimedia over IP and have everybody running across the internet, right? And, there's this incredible time, in telecommunications of rolling out what would become the internet. But you saw the nefarious side of it, that people were weaponizing the open source nature of the internet. And after, I was pursuing a political career at the time as well. And I was, one of the things about these systems is everybody is compartmentalized, so nobody gets to see the big picture. I was going into the full spectrum of telecommunications. I was training things like the NSA, the CIA, FBI. I was training state and local government type systems, law enforcement, military, naval intelligence, military intelligence, all the Booz Allen Hamilton, MITRE, General Dynamics, you name it, RAND Corporation. And so and all the manufacturers, the telecommunication gear. So I'm seeing that, oh my gosh, they are putting in a surveillance system in the name of, first it was for the drug war. That's when this stuff we'll talk about later about Kalia and things like that came in the name of fighting the war on drugs. But basically it put a back door on all the equipment. And that was going from the telephone companies and the internet service providers to the NSA. But what I was also seeing was you were seeing splits where it was going somewhere. And in February 2003, after 9/11 came out, we had 9/11, and I was backstage on that. And the whole thing of 9/11 was to justify the full surveillance state. That this is the big thing, is it was in place before 9/11, but then they justified it with 9/11, right? So, watching this film, was just, oh my gosh, I'm having PTSD attacks of, that was my old life. And this is what they've done with this technology. And so it was really interesting to watch this. Now, the thing that struck me immediately, being old and having, been a young adult in the 80s, and 90s, that was when here in America they were really selling the cosmopolitan magic Negroes, right? That, oh, now that we're in a post-racial society, everybody is just sophisticated black people. And so you just had this Hollywood turning out all these movies where you have the hero is the suave, street smart black guy like a Will Smith or an Eddie Murphy or an Arsenio Hall, that all the girls liked. There's that, black stud alpha male. And now all the white guys are delegated to the roles of the villains. Then you have the outsider Jewish genius that teams up with the black guy against the evil white guys. And so you see at this two levels that, all the guys at the NSA, the bad guys, are made out to be, the evil white guys. And Will Smith, of course, is the labor lawyer who's going up against the mob, right? And those evil Italian mobsters, he calls them Guidos, right? And they're Catholics, and they're the bad people. And so this is the setting the stage. And so Will Smith, like you said, is buying this stuff for his wife for Christmas. And that's the other thing, they set it at Christmas, right? So they always set these kind of movies at Christmas as just that dig on Christianity, etc. That's like, okay, let's totally distract from the meaning of Christmas here. And he's in a Victoria's Secret type store buying lingerie for, you don't know if it's for his wife or for his ex-girlfriend. So they've got that dynamic going. And that's when he runs into his friend who's on the run because he's now a targeted individual. And nobody who's never been a targeted individual knows what it's like to be a targeted individual when you have been special selected and they're going to mess with you and up to the point of killing you. And so it's interesting to see how this guy, life comes at him fast. He's just out doing his, nature loving, hippie stuff. We are going out to make sure that all the Canadian geese are migrating properly. And lo and behold, he has stumbled onto, as they say in the film, the Zapruder film. He has the assassination on tape. And he makes a copy of it and he takes off with the copy. And he's trying to, get to a safe place. There are no safe places. And so he hands it off to Will Smith in the lingerie store. So unbeknownst to him, he's now a targeted individual. So, this is what happens to your life when you become a targeted individual from this surveillance state. So back to you. So keep going.
Yeah, I won't be going through all the scenes in the movie. Actually, my synopsis is more or less it, but we'll get into later stuff as well. Yeah, you mentioned compartmentalization. I think that is very fascinating, that you can have a large group of people and they're all working on separate tasks and none of them has an iota what the project is and what it's for. And you get a lot of that. You get a lot of that in many different industries. But yeah, I found it very funny watching this. So I rewatched it a few days ago. I watched it first when it came out. I was a teenager and I thought it was a great film at the time. I have to say, I thought it was great. And it really made me think about the power of government. And I guess at that time in the 90s, and maybe a little bit into the noughties, there was, I would say there was a movement against big government. The idea that the government is getting inside your home and obviously it gets into your home through the TV anyway, but the idea that it can get into your home and record things. And, I think in this film, there's some quote where Brill says, before we needed a line to listen to what you were saying. Now we can just whip it out of the air. So yeah, there is this movement, and I guess it was there in Hollywood as well, this movement against big government taking away all your privacy. And in this movie, in order for them to, they still had, which, they wouldn't have to do now. They had to actually get inside Dean's house, the NSA. They had to physically get into his house, set up bugs here and there. And then they had to go to a rowing club. And when Dean was out doing his exercise with his friend, they were able to bug his shoes, I think his belt, something else, his jacket,
his pen, his cell phone. And
that's it.
They kept up with him in
the
computer data feeds, which one they were listening to.
Yeah, they had like 7 or 8 bugs on him, and I think his watch as well, because he throws the watch.
Yes,
later.
His watch.
Yeah, he makes time fly. At some stage he throws the watch off a skyscraper. But yeah, he's completely bugged. So there's this idea that they have to get inside his home. They have to go to his place of leisure and bug certain belongings of his. But now, we've come a long way from that ice cream van outside your house, slap bang in the middle of winter, and you've got a team of 20 guys in this van listening into what you're saying in your house, and they've already entered your house. Now, people have fridges that can record what's going on in the kitchen. People have mobile phones in their hands at all times. People have these machines that they speak to. And I think, the Edward Snowden thing came out a few years ago. And I think for about 2 days, it was big news. I heard people saying, "Oh my God, the NSA is recording everything, absolutely everything we say, every single phone call." And I think people, those that could think about it, they came to the conclusion that they'd have to accept it, And in a way, we all do. We're on the internet now, Blackbird. We're speaking. I just presume that, obviously, I'm recording this so I can put it up on the channel. But I presume there will be another recording of this. A corporation will have it. Maybe several corporations will have it. Maybe it'll be on a database. And it kind of comes with the territory. If you're going to use the internet, the net, you can presume it's there forever. So yeah, I just thought, looking back at this film from 1998, at that time, they had to, the state, they had to send men into your home when you weren't there to bug it. And now they don't have to do that. They don't have to do that. They can just tune into whatever appliance they want in whichever room of your house, and all your conversations are there. All the family disputes, all the tender words, it's all there, and it's all a digital transcript on several servers. So yeah, that's all I want to say about that. Blackbird, yeah, you said the magic Negro, and at the turn of the millennium, when you watched Hollywood movies, the African characters, like Will Smith in this case, they always had an African girlfriend or an African wife. It's not so much the case now, but back then, which wasn't so long ago, it was the case. And I guess Will Smith in the 90s and onwards was like the new Sidney Poitier. And in this film, Dean's wife is also a lawyer. So like they're a very rich black family, and they have a maid, a Mexican maid as well. So they're kind of well-to-do people. They are well-to-do people. And you said as well, Blackbird, that in 1998, this was prior to the Patriot Act. So all those discussions about privacy, they all went out the window on 9/11. After 9/11, it was a whole new ball game, and including in the airports everywhere. Life changed immeasurably at that time. So yeah, another thing I'd like to say is the idea of debanking. Now, this in the last 3 or 4 years, we've heard of many people for holding certain beliefs, historical beliefs. Maybe they have a certain perspective of the world. They can now be debanked, and some of them have been debanked just because they have certain opinions. And the bank will say, "We don't want you as a customer." And if one bank doesn't want you as a customer, then it's possible several banks won't want you as a customer. And the question then is, in this digital world we live in now, how are you going to make a living if you can't open a bank account. And there is a part in this film where Dean's wife, she's talking to him on the phone, and she's saying that, she tried to buy groceries and she couldn't. And she says, we can't buy food. So this idea that the system can turn on you, turn on a dime, and you're out in the cold and you can't access food. I find that very, very creepy, really creepy. The idea that you're suddenly cut off completely and you have no means to survive. So I'll pass it back to you, Blackbird9.
Yeah, life comes at you fast. And, 1 minute I was living the dream. I, had my very successful international business. I had my political career. I had my beautiful wife. I had my farm. I had my studios. I had, my horses, etc. And next thing you know, I'm living out of my car in a tent for 2 years. And so it's amazing how quickly you can fall in the system when the system turns against you. And even though I had, supposedly the ironclad 5-year contract with this company, Global Knowledge, it was interesting that it was in February. I was supposed to fly out. My election was in November of 2002. I was running for NC Congress or NC House, and on the anniversary of 9/11, I had posted a white paper basically on Yahoo Groups, interesting enough, and it was my take on the 1 year out of 9/11. By this time, I had proof that not only was there illegal electronic surveillance going on by the NSA and all these willing telecommunication companies and ISP service providers, but it was in place before 9/11. And two, that that's when I came out for 9/11 Truth and said the official story of 9/11 is physically impossible. And that's when I said who had the motive, who had the means, who had the opportunity, and most importantly, who benefited. And I cited things like the Odin-Yenin Plan of Greater Israel, the Clean Break Strategy by Richard Pearl, Terrorism, How the West Can Win by Benjamin Netanyahu, and then the Project for the New American Century papers, et cetera, that actually called for a new Pearl Harbor 1 year before 9/11. And it's interesting that paper was called We're All Palestinians Now, right? So this is 2002, September 11th, 2002. And what's interesting is that paper disappeared off the group chat out of my backups. And the people that had access in the party to have done it all denied that they removed it. They didn't like it, and believe me, I was the most, immediately fell from grace from the party because enough people had read it to basically say I'm a problem because the party was so infiltrated by chicken swingers. But also, nobody claimed in deleting it. So that means that some, other entity like Yahoo Groups themselves removed it, right? So that was my first taste of the new post 9/11, where you can just get deplatformed. They just, something just suddenly removes your material. You no longer have First Amendment rights, and they do it and say, this is terms of service. This is our community standards. And it was a big argument back in the day about this. The old philosophy was the telephone company owned the infrastructure, but, had no rights to the communications that were going over that infrastructure. The conversations could not be used in a court of law. The only things that the courts could do was called a pen register tap, where you went to a court, a judge said, I'm going to give you a warrant because you have shown with probable cause a reason for this surveillance. And you could either do, like I said, a pen register or a tap and trace. And it's basically, what phone calls are, what phone numbers are calling you, and what numbers are you calling, right? But the actual conversations were not admissible into law. And that was the way it was. But suddenly you got this concept from the telecommunication companies that if we own the infrastructure, we own the servers, we own all content, and therefore we reserve editorial right to remove whatever content we don't like. And so when you look at this, when the Republic was started in December 15th, 1791, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution were ratified, known as the Bill of Rights. And these were not giving us rights. These were basically enumerating what your God-given natural rights are, right? And so First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free speech exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized, right? So that held tight in the United States until after World War II. And that's when you started seeing all of this FBI surveillance on American citizens and this new thing called the NSA. And you got to remember that, Henry Truman created the NSA in the United States, and it was so secret, it was known as no such agency. And it wasn't actually exposed until the 1960s. So all this time you had the NSA doing all of this signal intercept from radio signals to telephone signals, and nobody even knows the agency existed. It's interesting that at the same time, 1934, the USSR NKVD is founded. In 1949, the Israeli Mossad is founded. In 1952, Israel's Unit 8200 is founded, which is their NSA. 1952, the NSA is founded. And then in 57, Unit 269 in Israel is founded. So you see that every country, you started seeing these shadow agencies that, didn't exist before, and their job was to spy on everyone, right? And so, the NSA got in trouble when this was exposed, and this led to the Church Senate hearings in the 70s, where it was like, this is where you have to have FISA courts. The NSA, under no circumstances, can ever spy on U.S. citizens on U.S. soil. And, it's like that's what the FBI is for. NSA is for foreign enemies. CIA is for foreign enemies. So they redrew this big boundary. Well, in the 90s, all that went away under Bill Clinton. And it's interesting in the film, this congressman is against the new Telecommunication Act. Well, it was Bill Clinton, who we now know was completely compromised by Israel through Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, that the Telecommunication Act of 1996 passed. Also the CALEA, which is Communication for Law Enforcement Act, where they don't have to go into the substations in your neighborhood and put alligator clips on the, 66 blocks to listen to your phone calls. They just basically sit at a computer and can pull up off the servers everything you're saying, right? And so that was, the whole thing of CALEA was supposedly to, fight drugs, and then the Telecommunication Act allowed all this incredible overreach and allowed the NSA to start doing what they were putting in place. And the only the only telecommunication company in the United States that did not go along with the legal surveillance program was Joseph Nacho of Quest. And he got targeted. just like in the movie. They went after his company. They framed him for all the supposedly insider trading violations, et cetera. It was just complete legal, warfare, lawfare, because he was going on the record everywhere saying that the NSA approached him a year to 6 months before 9/11 to put all this stuff in place. And that was what I was saying, was this was all in place before 9/11, and then they justified it with 9/11. So anybody that criticizes, like, well, we have to make sacrifices for security under this. And, it's, the first they refused to admit that it existed, right? That they weren't doing anything wrong. When we finally proved that, yes, they are doing this big sweep of all the data, they finally came through and said, okay, yes, we were doing it, but it was justified because of 9/11. And the first thing Obama did when he's elected in 2008 is sign the Telecommunication Immunity Act, which forgives all those telecommunication companies that committed treason. Meanwhile, Joseph Nacho is still in prison, but everybody else who was shredding the Constitution, they all got pardoned by this Jeffrey Epstein AIPAC compromise Congress critters that signed off on the Telecommunication Act, right? And so this was, that was when kind of the last hope that I would ever get retribution in courts, about what happened to me, because they just got immunity. It's like they were completely shredding everything this country was about. But, it's fine. So with your permission, I'd like to play General Hayden's comments on the Fourth Amendment in 2006, when all this is coming out. And you can hear the pill pull of his, trying to sell you something that's not there. And this idea of, the Constitution, Fourth Amendment being a reasonable standard, and this came from Alan Dershowitz, of course, and his pill pull magic. So listen how General Hayden tries to do damage control after we finally proved that they were doing what they were doing.
My understanding is that the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution specifies that you must have probable cause to be able to do a search that does not violate an American's right against unlawful searches and seizures.
Actually, the Fourth Amendment actually protects all of us against unreasonable search and seizure.
But
that's what it says.
The measure is probable cause, I believe.
The amendment says unreasonable search and seizure.
But does it not say probable?
No.
The court standard, the legal standard,
search and seizure.
the legal standard is probable cause.
Just to be very clear, okay, and believe me, if there's any amendment to the Constitution that employees of the National Security Agency are familiar with, it's the Fourth, right? And it is a reasonableness standard in the Fourth Amendment.
To quote the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States in its entirety, the one the General and the NSA folks are so familiar with and know is about reasonableness and not about probable cause, quote, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, no warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Well, maybe they have a different constitution over there at the NSA.
And so at the same time, that clip was just going viral everywhere on this new thing called YouTube. Mr. Mark Klein was revealing room 641A at the AT&T facility, which was a special room that was basically splitting off the signals for the NSA and for, this was the big one, for Israel. I was trying to prove in 2003 that, there was a backdoor behind the NSA going somewhere. My most likely suspect was Israel, but I couldn't prove it at the time. And then in 2013, Mr. Edward Snowden, from working with Booz Allen Hamilton, who was up to their eyes in all of this, he exposed that, yes, indeed, there is not only a pipe going to Israel's Unit 8200, but everything goes there. And like you said, they can, not just your calls that you're making, they can just randomly turn on your computer or your smartphone's microphone or video camera. They can track you with the cell phone towers every place you're going, and they keep a log of your activities. They keep a log of who you're calling and who has called you. How long do you talk? Right? And all that goes into this great AI, machine to then do a threat analysis on you. Right? And, like they say, they want to know you better than you know yourself. Right? So back to you.
Yeah, in a minute, I'll go through some quotes from the movie that marry up with a lot of what you've said, Blackbird. I remember when the Snowden thing came out, and some guy on the TV, I remember he was moaning about this, that the government, the NSA would have so much power and influence. And he gave a very good analogy at the time. It was something along the lines of, if back in the day, before the internet, when people, and perhaps even before, most people had telephones, when people sent each other letters, you went to the post office and you got a stamp and you posted a letter to somebody. And he said, imagine back then if at the post office you had, a separate office that belonged to the government, and every single letter that, was sent, they would take the envelope, they would open it, take out the letter, make a photocopy of it, and then put your original letter back in the envelope, seal it, and send it on. I remember he said that if people back then heard about that, they would go mental. They would say, there's no way we're accepting that, that the government is opening up our post and making photocopies of it. No way. But I think when it's digital, when it's more instantaneous, you send an email, you send a message, people, they're a bit more lax about it, I will say. So yeah, I'll go through some quotes from the movie. And after that, I think, Blackbird, you have another audio clip to play. And we'll also discuss, at the end of this chat, we'll discuss the death of Gene Hackman, which struck me as very, very strange indeed. So here are some quotes, and this is when Dean and Brill, they've teamed up. Rachel Banks has been murdered. I believe Brill was looking after her because he was friends with her dad or something like this. And she was an associate of Dean's. She was also his ex-girlfriend, and she used to give him information. I believe she got the information from Brill, and she would then pass it on to Dean, and there was some financial deal going on there as well. She got her 15% commission, but the NSA took her out to get to Dean. And Brill brings Dean to his hideout, and Brill, he knows how these devices work because he invented most of them. And even though they have, they've improved, he knows the basics. He knows how they work. He knows the blind spots and all the rest. So there's one part where they're driving out of the compound, out of Brill's compound, his hideaway, and suddenly the place blows up. And Dean says, "What the hell is happening?" And Brill says, "I blew up the building." And Dean says, "Why?" And Brill says, "Because you made a phone call." So this was earlier in the movie when I think they were at a shop, and Brill had told Dean, "Don't make any phone calls." And what does Dean do? He goes to a payphone and he phones his wife, and immediately the NSA can locate where they are. So yeah, another one is Brill says to Dean, do they know me? And Dean says, "Who's them?" Brill, "Do they know me?" Dean, "I don't know what you're talking about." And Brill says, "You're either very smart or incredibly stupid." And then another one, which I really liked. Brill says, "In guerrilla warfare, you try to use your weaknesses as strengths." Dean, "Such as?" Brill, "Well, if they're big and you're small, then you're mobile and they're slow. You're hidden and they're exposed. You only fight battles you know you can win. That's the way the Viet Cong did it. You captured their weapons and you used them against them the next time. And another quote from Brill, and this ties in with what Blackbird's been saying. The government's been in bed with the entire telecommunications industry since the 40s. They've infected everything. They get into your bank statements, computer files, email, listen to your phone calls, every wire, every airwave. The more technology used, the easier it is for them to keep tabs on you. It's a brave new world out there. At least it had better be. And I'll go down to another one here. And I think there's a good one from Reynolds as well, but here's another one from Brill. Fort Meade has 18 acres of mainframe computers underground. You're talking to your wife on the phone and you use the word bomb, President, Allah, any of 100 keywords. The computer recognizes it, automatically records it, red flags it for analysis. That was 20 years ago. All right. Let's see what else I have here. So this is Reynolds. This is Reynolds. The body in the movie. We never dealt with domestic. With us, it was always war. We won the war. Now we're fighting the peace. It's a lot more volatile. Now we've got 10 million crackpots out there with sniper scopes, sarin gas, and C4. 10-year-olds on the net, downloading encryption we can barely break, not to mention instructions on how to make a low-yield nuclear device. Privacy has been dead for years because we can't risk it. The only privacy that's left is the inside of your head. Maybe that's enough. You think we're the enemy of democracy, you and I. I think we're democracy's last hope. Okay, I pass it back to Blackbird.
Great quotes. And I love, once you just focus on the storyline, I love the strategy of, okay, we're targeted, we're being hunted. In that type of game, your long-term survival is better if you become the hunter and go after the person that's hunting you. Because if you remain the hunted, you just have to make one mistake. And the old adage is the hunter can make 100 mistakes. The hunted need only make one. And so you're like, okay, we've got to go after the people that are after us. We have recognized it through, Gene Hackman's playing the wise old man. This is part of that archetype of the hero's journey where they realize they have gone through the tempest. They are now on their odyssey and they don't understand it. So they have to run into the old man or the old warrior that can explain it to them. And this is Gene Hackman's character is Brill, that he was an NSA guy back when they were, supposedly the good guys. I really question if the NSA was ever good guys, but in their mindset, they're out there fighting the good fight on foreign soil and intercepting foreign intelligence, etc., not battling the peace. And this is where you get into what we'll talk about in a little bit with Noah Harari and the New World Order endgame. And this isn't about just your right to privacy, your right of association, etc. This is a far bigger thing that I would discover after 9/11 when you start figuring out, okay, like Sherlock Holmes says, when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. So 9/11 was totally fabricated. So who done it, right? So you have who had the motive, who had the means, who had the opportunity, who benefited. Then what is their end game and what are their tactics? By way of deception, you shall make war. That is the Israeli Mossad motto. All of these 20th century demon-spawned intelligence agency of the West are being controlled by the same interest. And they put little ribbons and valor medals on it to say, well, we're doing the greater good, so therefore we're allowed to break the rules. This is the thing. They teach these 20-somethings. I like that in the movie. They were just like my students, the best and the brightest, always trying to outdo each other, overachieve, or be the smartest in the class. And whatever their management told them, that was gospel. And I'm sitting there trying to explain the FISA laws and the Fourth Amendments to the NSA, and my students are like, we're at the NSA. We can spy on anybody, anywhere, at any time. What that Constitution means is we just can't use what we find in a court of law. We're not trying to take people to court. We're making kill lists, and all the world, because of 9/11, is now the battlefield. So we have this global war on terror by the Patriot Act that that makes them think that they have the right to do anything, right? So this was the mindset I was working with at the NSA, training the NSA guys that, no, what you're doing, you have to follow the FISA laws. You get a warrant, and they're like, no, that's not how we do it. And it was interesting before I got blacklisted that my NSA course manager requested first when I asked them the red flags of the NSA was when I asked them about, do they want my European version of the class, because I was training this internationally, right? And there's a different type of signaling between American phone signals and European phone signals in the rest of the world, basically called T1 signaling versus E1 signaling. And I was shocked when the NSA manager said, we want the T1 version. So that was the red flag that they plan to use this on U.S. soil, right? And then the second thing was I was asked to remove all my modules on communication law because they were confusing to the students talking about the Fourth Amendment and the FISA rules on electronic surveillance. Then the final big red flag was the event that changed everything. Everything changed on 9/11. With the exception of my course curriculum. I did not have to make a single major change to any of my training materials that I had developed. Everything was operating just like it had been planned to. So that was the big red flags there of 9/11 and this idea of we can do this, we're justified in doing this, right? And then, getting back to the movie, the strategy of let's you and them fight. When you realize you are up against a superior opponent, you can't fight them yourself, so you have to find another enemy that is equal or better to your enemy so that you can set them at odds with each other. And this was the brilliance of luring the NSA guys into the FBI sting operation on the Italian mob family, right? So they made it look like the tape that the mob wanted, which was basically a parole violation tape, and the tape that the NSA wanted of the assassinating the congressman got convoluted, right? And so they're basically setting each other at odds to make the NSA and the FBI and the mob, the Italian mob, the Guidos, the Romans, the Catholics, all kill each other while Will Smith and Gene Hackman, survive to fight another day, right? So I just thought that part of the movie was, brilliant in the strategy of, and then you see, Brill just disappearing into the east of Eden land of Nod where all the spooks go, right? So I just thought that was interesting. And then Will Smith, we see, gets to go back to his affluent life. Well, in reality, ask me and, Edward Snowden, do you ever get to go back to your old life? And the answer is no, you don't get to go back to your old life once you've been targeted. You usually end up like the Melissa Milano character, the ex-girlfriend, who gets murdered as a way to set these people up, right? Or, they just destroy you, and you become a outcast. You become a non-person in this system. So it's been interesting, these past, quarter of a century now, trying to build my life back up to some sense of, some sense of, normalcy, rather than just being, living bare bones, close to the bone, trying to survive. And this, you're an outcast. And, but you're getting back to the end game of this, when you look at all of the surveillance in every Western country and how they do this, with the five eyes of, it would be illegal if we Americans spied on that Blackburn kid over there in North Kakalaki, but it would just be ducky fine if the UK or New Zealand or Australia spied on him and then shared the information with us. This was what the whole Five Eyes scam was after World War II, of sharing intelligence. It was basically a way to circumvent the national laws on surveillance. You Brits can't spy on Brits. MI6 is not supposed to spy on Brits, but the NSA can. And what's interesting is all the Five Eyes, everybody shares everything with Israel. So why is Israel so important but not talked about in this? And so I'd like, if your permission, I'd like to play the Noah Harari public intellectual clip on that explains this idea of controlling people through gathering all this information. So can I play this now?
Yeah, go ahead.
In order to collaborate on a large scale, you need to convince everybody to believe in the same story. What really the engine of history is stories. And they don't even need to be true. Some of the most powerful stories in history were fictions.
Right.
But you need to get everybody, or at least a significant part of the population, to believe in the same story. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Science is not really, at least this is my view as a historian, science is not really about truth. It's about power. The real aim of science as a project, as an establishment, is not truth, it's power. Particular individuals, particular scientists may be very interested in the truth, personally. But as an institution, the real aim of science is power. Those who own the data really own the future. Mm-hmm. We are reaching a point in human history that we have enough biological knowledge and we have enough computing power, and all you need in order to systematically hack millions of people is just the data. Mm-hmm. That to hack people means to know people better than they know themselves. Right. To somebody in San Francisco, in Beijing, knows you, knows more about you than you know about yourself, about your medical condition, about your mental weaknesses, things that you did 5 years ago, 20 years ago, you completely forgot about them, they know it.
Right.
This is something we never faced before. Not even the KGB could do it.
Right.
And we are already beginning to see the emergence of such total surveillance regimes in places like Xinjiang, in places like in my own home country in Israel. We have this big laboratory of surveillance called the occupied territories, where you have 2.5 million guinea pigs of how to completely survey and control a population with very few soldiers. I mean, when you look at the numbers, it's amazing how few soldiers you need to control millions of people if you have their data.
Easy to control millions of people with very few soldiers or policemen if you have their data. Why are all these Silicon Valley Unit 8200 run companies like Google, Twitter, X, Facebook, etc., why is it free? It's because you're the product. Why are those chicken swinger controlled supermarkets and merchant shops giving you the customer VIP card? It's so they can track all your purchases and analyze you. You know, why does Spectrum Cable and Time Warner spend all that money on smart technology to monitor every channel you watch, how long you watch it, etc.? And why? Because they are in this prism type system where you're being graded and sorted to be culled in this World Economic Forum, Brave New World they have planned for us that is a post-free will society. And that's the truly terrifying part, is this idea of this intransigent state that can just make you a non-person, and suddenly all your credit cards don't work. You have no means to support yourself. You will never get past human resources to find a job. Any work you have will have to be off the record, right? And so this is, where they're wanting to do this, because they think they're in charge of the world, and that, we're the, people that want freedom and privacy, we're the problem, we need to get rid of them, and then the rest of the world will fit nicely into our world designs and our depopulation agenda. Noah Harari is always talking about all those useless eaters, that we have, more people than we could ever need. And basically what he's saying is, we chicken swingers only need X number of slaves, and the rest of you are expendable. And that is, to me, the truly terrifying part of, what has happened since this film has come out. So back to you.
Yeah, it is true that the system knows people better than they know themselves. And you hear many stories now. People will tell you that they were out, they were outside, or they were somewhere and they were chatting to a friend, and they said to their friend, I'm going to go to the town later and I'm going to buy some turnip seeds for the garden. And perhaps they never get to the town. And that night they're on their computer, a different device, and the browser is full of advertisements for turnip seed. So it's been recorded.
Exactly.
It's been recorded. And even I remember, as a few months ago, I was chatting to someone online, and we were talking about, I don't know, Bucharest or somewhere like that. And it was very, very, it was a brief conversation about Bucharest. And I went out. I didn't bring my phone with me or anything like that. I went out, and when I got back at night, and I was on a completely different device, lots of advertisements for flights to Bucharest, no other city, only Bucharest. So it's this thing now that, people watching, let's say they watch Netflix, they watch a certain series, you watch YouTube videos, I watch YouTube videos, I'm as guilty as anyone else. And, the algorithms, the AI, it's drawing a picture of you, and then it starts giving you suggestions. And for some people, they never actually, it's come to a stage whereby they never actually make a decision about what they want to watch next. It's in the suggestions. They click on it, they watch it, and then watching that creates another suggestion, and so on and so forth. So they're never actually stopping to decide, will I watch this or will I watch that? They kind of just click on the next thing that the system tells them will be good for them. So yeah, Blackbird, question for you. When you became 9/11 truther, as they say, truther, which I don't like that word, to be honest, that word truther. But anyway, when you became a 9/11 truther, you mentioned that you had horses. Did you wake up one night in your bed, pull back the blankets, and see a horse's head in the bed?
Not that severe. Did have several of our farm animals killed. There was threats to poison the horses. That's why we had to get rid of the horses, to get them to safety, because they were folks were threatening. Had several occasions where they tried to plant drugs on me. So that kind of thing. That's the reality. Numerous death threats. Yeah, that was part of it. You just start living with the constant death threats. But that's just part of that. I'm always reminded of Kafka's book, The Trial, where one day you realize that there has been a Star Chamber trial that you didn't get to take part in, but you were found guilty. and you're going to be punished. You just won't know how. And this is why I always say I've got the curse, because you have been tagged, and now bad things are going to happen to you, and they're completely justified in this, because the ends justify the means of bringing in their utopia. Right. And so this is the mindset of these people. But no, I didn't find a horse head, but close to it. And the worst part was, the death threats against my wife at the time. I've, since got divorced. That was the thing is, I don't think any couple could survive what they put us through. It's kind of like in Orwell's 1984, Room 100, it's nobody survives Room 100. And that was, part of it. They just, they always go try to split you up from your spouse. In the movie, they're accusing him of having an affair with the ex-girlfriend to drive the wife away from him. And her family, now and all her friends hate you now, right? And your family has been warned against you. That was the other thing, is you get used to your family members publicly disowning you in all your crazy ways. That's, rather than looking at your hate facts, they just go along with the crowd. That's part of that group conformity. And it was particularly painful with me and my father, who was professional military. He had retired from the Air Force, and one of those 17-year-olds after Pearl Harbor went and lied about his age to join up, and went and joined the Navy, and spent, World War II doing medical evac out of Norfolk, and seeing things that no 17-year-old kid should ever have to see, right? And, for me to try to explain to him that, this system has been corrupted. It has been weaponized against us. And, everything you've heard about 9/11 is a lie. And, this is what's going on with the telephone company. And I was just outside his Overton window so bad, because, it's like, oh, they just wouldn't do that. My country wouldn't do that. My military, and that General Hayden was Air Force. That just made it worse, that I was attacking an Air Force general. That was just, you don't do that, because, my dad went from the Navy to the Air Force. Well, actually, Army Air Corps, then that became the Air Force. So that was, a real bad issue of just, the family situation. But that's how these people operate. And the glee that these operatives had in doing this, that, they have targeted the individual and just ruthlessly attacking them with no consideration of, well, maybe this guy's innocent, maybe, it's like, no, our job is to completely destroy this person. We're here to create kill lists. This guy is a threat because he could expose this political assassination, the propaganda of the deed that happened against this congressman that wouldn't go along with the program, right? That I always talk about the Meany method, the bully, bribe, blackmail, banish, and bury. And so they had to take him out, just like, remember the anthrax attacks after 9/11? And the people who got the real anthrax were the people that were going against the Patriot Act being approved, right? And all the people that got fake anthrax were all the Jewish operatives, like Judith Miller at the Times, etc. But in the way that anthrax investigation went, notice the FBI never, ever investigated Dr. Philip K. Zack. Instead, they first said it was, Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, they've got anthrax and they're going to poison us all. Then we've proved that strain of anthrax came from a U.S. laboratory at Fort Detrick, right? Then we proved that Philip K. Zack was caught on surveillance cameras being let in by a fellow Jewish co-worker, right, after he had been fired from the facility for racist attacks against Arab co-workers, right? So who had the motive here? And instead they went after Hatfield and Bruce Evans, and then Hatfield, and then everything went when Evans died from a supposed Tylenol overdose, that was the end of it, and they completely closed the investigation as closed, right? And so you see that the FBI has always been covering Jewish crimes, just like the NSA is there to cover Jewish crimes. And so it's interesting, after General Hayden left the NSA, he went to the CIA, and he was responsible for seeing that all the evidence against the Israeli connection, the Israeli Mossad, to the Abu Ghraib torture scandal and black site scandals, all that evidence got destroyed, right? Then Hayden went to work for the Chertoff Group with Michael Chertoff, who wrote the Patriot Act with advisor Marcus Wolf, who had designed the East German Stasi programs, right? So these are the people that Michael Hayden hangs out with. And then, of course, during the Trump election against Biden, he was one of the 50 intelligence professionals that signed off to say the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation, even though it was completely true. So, this is the kind of people that are occupying these seats of power. No matter how many crimes they do that should result in them being hung or put in front of a firing squad, they just get moved to another operation. And, so it's just like, those people I was training at the NSA, they were fighting the war of terror because 9/11, we're going to get these terrorists, and we're going to, break whatever laws we need to do to carry out the mission, even if we have to do it on U.S. soil now, because the world is a battlefield after 9/11. So there are no more civil liberties. There are no privacy things. And this is the mindset of everything that's after 9/11. And it just continues. And like you said, it's just gotten more sophisticated.
I've just a few more notes here for the movie. And there's one part, it's at the start of the movie, where Dean, he goes into these mobsters and he's showing them the video, and he wants to shake them down for cash. And the main guy, the main mobster, he practically says, we don't care about your associates, but we're going to make an example out of you, And when I was watching this, I was thinking, right, there are about 20 of them in the room. He's on his own. He's a fish out of water here. These guys are violent. And I was thinking, they can kill him unless he reveals his source. And the guy keeps saying, right, tell me your source. You better tell me your source. And Dean is like, and then the mobster says, okay, I'll tell you what, you've got a week. And I was thinking, come on, he's not gonna just let him go, this slick labor lawyer, he's not gonna let him go when he has all the cards, when he has him surrounded, and he could get the confession out of him. So I thought that was a little bit weak in the script, in the plot. And another thing is Dean, when he's out shopping for lingerie, etc., and I think he gets some video, handheld video console for his son. He bumps into that guy who has the video, and who slips it into his shopping bags. But I thought it was very funny. Dean actually, you hear about someone at the scene of a crime leaving their calling card, but in this case, Dean literally leaves his calling card, his business card, with the guy. So when that guy gets killed, he's knocked down by a bus. The NSA agents swarm around his corpse, and they start taking out his wallet and everything. And they come across that business card, and that's what leads them. Now, they probably would have found out Dean's identity, but I think it would have taken them a lot longer. But the fact that he left his business card with that guy, who he didn't seem to know him very well either, but hey, here's my card. So yeah, and then we've already got into it, but when Brill and Dean team up and they turn the tables on Reynolds and his cronies in the NSA, the hunter becomes the hunted. And then you like to see this, but they bug his home. So he's there with his grandkid or something, and she's saying, I'm on TV, the little girl. And Reynolds looks up and he sees that, there's a camera obviously up on the ceiling recording them, and it's connected to the TV. And, it's that part where you realize the God, the all-seeing eye, is now a mere mortal. He's now in the same situation as those he's going after. So, Blackbird, is there anything else you want to say about this movie? We'll conclude by getting into Hackman's death, if there's anything you want to say about that.
Well, it's just great stuff. I have thoroughly enjoyed this. Yes, that's the thing. The hunter becomes the hunted. And there are two types of bugs when you're doing an operation on somebody: the ones they never find and the ones you want them to find. You want your mark, your target, to know that they're being watched. That's part of the psychological warfare of this. And so you put bugs where they can find it to say, we know who you are, but you don't know who we are. And so you're at a tactical disadvantage where, okay, somebody is watching me, but I don't know who it is. And that this Brill guy could come after his old department, the old NSA guy coming after the new NSA guy. And that part reminded me of an old 70s film with Walter Matthau called Hopscotch, about two CIA agents that are playing cat and mouse with each other, the old CIA guy and the new CIA guy. And so that would be an interesting one for you to watch. Maybe we'll do a review on it sometime. It's called Hopscotch, and very interesting game theory in that as well, about, you're waging a fourth, fifth generation asymmetrical war against this person. And, it's just, like I said, interesting stuff. Not as many explosions as with this. That was one of the things that says all the stuff blowing up and catching on fire in this movie. There's a lot of, big drama in it. Overall, just the game theory was fascinating, especially in light of what I went through. Just looking through my notes of. One more telecommunication nugget I had was, fun fact: the morning of 9/11, Israeli instant messaging service Otigos sent messages out telling people not to go to work, and over 4,000 Jewish Israelis didn't show up for work that day in the World Trade Center complex. Also, one of the things I was talking about, pin register and tap and trace, was, you could see who's calling who and who called you. In the 90s, one of the things Bill Clinton authorized, in addition to all his other things, was this part of the telecommunication law that allowed U.S. telecom companies to outsource their billing, and it all went to the Israeli firms that also happened to be like 50% owned by the government, this like Amdocs and Comsys. And basically, they were able to do everything you could do with a pin register and tap and trace by just compiling all the billing information and making profiles on the Americans from that. So this is how far back that aspect goes of the Israelis targeting us, and making profiles on us and doing threat assessments on it and taking out any threat to the agenda. And that's when you get your teams to come in and bully, bribe, blackmail, banish, or bury you. And I'm just thankful I made it through another Purim. A lot of people were recording this on Friday, 3/14 Pi Day, and of course this is Purim, and a lot of online social influence noticers all got swatted last night. And so that's another type of terrorism where you call the police and say your target is, going to kill themselves, they're going to kill somebody else. And because of the Patriot Act and the Military Commissions Act and all those other post 9/11 stuff, your local law enforcement is now obligated to do a full SWAT raid on your house or your business, or et cetera. And that a lot of that happened last night. So I thought that was very interesting in light that we were going to be reviewing this today, because this does happen. You have armed guys show up and all they know is they've been told by their authorities that you're the target. And the point of the mission is to take out the target any way necessary. and that somebody else is responsible for it. Somebody else is taking authority for this, right? And this was why Trotsky said that every policeman knows, like the military, governments come and go, but the police remain. The police are going to do whatever the people in authority tell them to do. And this was part of the terror of the Bolshevik Red Revolution, was they used the police to round everybody up. Same thing with the Holodomor, same thing with the Armenian genocide. Use your police to make this all legal. And so everything that they did to me and Edward Snowden and all these other people was perfectly legal under all these changes they made after 9/11, because we're under the War Powers Act, that this is a state of emergency. So basically all constitutional rights are suspended because we're in this perpetual state of emergency now. And so all you see on this, your legislators and your judges and your presidents, that's all window dressing. Your real power is with these agencies like the NSA and the FBI and the CIA that are ruling from the shadows. Your AIPAC handlers back in Israel are the ones dictating policy, and that is the communitarian root of this madness, that everybody's just doing what they're told because they're told that you're a bad person. So anyway, so back to you.
Those SWAT raids can be deadly, and you hear
about
people,
that's what they're designed for. That if you push back in any way, they will kill you, and so they just assassinated you with the police.
Yeah. There was a guy, I remember, must be like 2 years ago, there was some guy who was going online and he was complaining about Biden this and Biden that. And then I heard that he got swatted and he was killed. These guys show up and they're full of adrenaline. They're full of adrenaline. God only knows what else is in their bloodstream, and they've got guns. So it's a recipe for disaster in many ways. And I've heard of people who, they phone up the emergency services or whatever, and they do it for a laugh or they do it for internet clout, and then people die. It's sickening to hear it, Gene Hackman, Blackbird. I watched, funnily enough, like he died there about a fortnight ago. And last weekend, I actually watched 2 of his films from the 70s, because I don't remember him from much. When I saw him in this movie back in the day, I thought, that guy's familiar. I don't know what he's from, but he's familiar. And then I remembered I think he was Lex Luthor in the old Superman films. But apart from that, I didn't know much about his films. And last weekend I watched 2 films, and he plays a very similar role in these 2 films from the 70s as he does in Enemy of the State. And one of them is from 1974. It's called The Conversation. And in that movie, his character is working for the government, and he's I don't know if he has a private company or what, and he's subcontracted by the government, but more or less he records people who are have a question mark over them. He records them, he bugs them, and he listens to their conversations. And the other film was called The Domino Principle from 1977, and in that one he's like a secret agent who wants to get out, but once you're in, you can never get out. And the government, the CIA, they really come after him. And like you said, no holds barred. They will come after your loved ones. They will come after everything you hold dear. So Gene Hackman died. I didn't read much about it. I did see on Twitter and on 1 or 2 other websites that it seemed very strange. They say, I don't know, the wife also died, and they say her corpse was mummified, and the dog, they had a dog, and it was in a wardrobe or something, and it couldn't get out, and it died. And then obviously Hackman, he died as well. Have you heard anything about this? Also, they say there were pills all over the place, etc. Now, maybe they weren't killed. Maybe they were, I don't know, but it just seems very, very strange from what the media has told us.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Every time you see the Overton window push on the Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell Unit 269 blackmail bribery scandals and the P. Diddy stuff, you have a lot of very mysterious deaths, and a lot of it looks like some very sophisticated wet work is going on. And so I don't know anybody who read the Gene Hackman's wife, and Gene Hackman's dog story and think that was an organic situation, that there was something nefarious about how this all went down, and it just happened to be right ahead of one of the big Jeffrey Epstein drops, supposedly, that then didn't happen. But it's going to be interesting to see, how that all played out, or if it's just going to disappear. So many of these mysterious Hollywood deaths, they just get scrubbed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and they're masters at creating the scene, the set. We can kill you and make it look like a suicide, make it look like a murder-suicide, make it look like you had a heart attack, make it look like you had a stroke. We can set you up, to completely destroy you, make you the patsy out for a murder, like he was trying to do with his ex-girlfriend. They kill her and then plant all the evidence around to make, point the arrow right at him, and that's the way they operate. And this is that by way of deception. There is no such thing as establishing truth. Truth is totally subjective. Truth is whatever we need it to be to get our way. And that's the difference between the European mindset and the chicken swinger mindset. The Marxist chicken swinger mindset, it's all about winning. It's not about establishing truth. It's not about establishing justice. It's about power. And that's the bottom line. And they, are intransigent. That's where the whole system comes from. Is, they won't budge an inch. They won't compromise. They are completely justified in what they're doing. And that's something that most people can't get their heads around.
Okay, Blackbird, I will put links in for your Twitter and also for the Republic Broadcasting Network. So you do a radio show. Would you like to tell us about your radio show? I think it's every Saturday.
Yes, I'll do the Snack Shack every Saturday from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Republic Broadcasting Network. And that also gets picked up by several other networks around the world. So be sure to tune in. And also on Sunday nights, I have the late night show after Mr. Robert Rayvolt's show from 1 to 2, where they do a best of the Breakfast Club series, or Breakfast Club Revisited, I should say, where they take the old Breakfast Club series I started in 2015 and replay the second hour timeline, and as we connect the dots through history. So that's all archived on RBN, so be sure to check those out.
And I have to say, I am a fan of the Breakfast Club series. I've listened to several of them. And I've said it before, and I will say it again. This guy, BLACKBIRD9, I believe he is Joseph Campbell 2.0. 2.0. He gives
that is high praise.
It's high praise, but it's I'm not being modest here with my praise. He's a very, very smart guy, and when it comes to anthropology and all that and civilizations, he's worth listening to, BLACKBIRD9. So do check out the Breakfast Club series, and do check out the Snack Chat. Is that it? The Snack Chat.
Snack Shack, yes.
Snack Shack. That's it. Snack Shack. All right. BLACKBIRD9, thank you very much for coming on, and until soon.
Thank you so much.